We live in an era where complexity has been sold as evolution and haste as a virtue, as if speed was synonymous with progress and complication were proof of intelligence. An era in which technology, once heralded as liberating, is now an invisible chain that binds us to notification addiction, to the control of algorithms that shape our thoughts, and to the silent slavery of always being available. The promise of freedom has become a golden cage. We have access to everything, but no time for anything. Artificial abundance suffocates true abundance, that which is born of silence, space, contemplation, and real contact with life. Today, every street is a showcase of stimuli, every screen is an arena of competition for attention, and every conversation carries the hurried echo of those already thinking about their next task. It is in this saturated scenario that Henry David Thoreau's message, written in the 19th century, resurfaces not as a poetic idea for sensitive souls, but as a manifesto for survival. Thoreau, who retreated to Walden Pond not to escape the world, but to see it more clearly, was not a naive idealist. He was a revolutionary who understood that the greatest prison is not within walls, but in the desires we accept as natural. He saw in the progress of his time a farce similar to that of today. Machines promising free time, but creating new dependencies. Consumption promising happiness, but generating anxiety. Social conventions dictating what is success while emptying life of meaning. His lesson is simple and radical. If we do not lead our lives with intention, they will be led by forces that do not care about us. And the price of living like everyone else often is our very freedom. We trade the right to decide for the comfort of obeying. We sell our most precious time in exchange for goods that quickly lose value. Modern man works to maintain a lifestyle that prevents him from living. Today, when we look at a planet exhausted by exploitation and a humanity suffocated by anxiety, Thoreau's urgency echoes as never before. The simplicity he advocated is not a whim, it is an antidote to the chronic illness of a civilization that has forgotten how to rest, breathe, and feel. It is the silent revolution that begins with saying no to the superfluous and yes to the essential. It is not about returning to the past, but about recovering the clarity that the present has stolen from us. We need Thoreau today as we need air, because his message is a reminder that freedom cannot be bought, it must be earned, and that living with less is not giving up on life, but freeing oneself to truly live it. He would remind us that simplicity is not escape, it is resistance. It is not a luxury reserved for a select few, but an urgent necessity for anyone who wants to preserve their sanity in a world that idolizes haste and deifies excess. Living with less, according to Thoreau, does not mean giving up true comfort, that which comes from inner peace, but rather rejecting false comfort, which imprisons rather than liberates. It is the conscious choice to cut the invisible chains that bind us to jobs that drain our vitality, debts that enslave us, and social standards that force us to live a life we did not choose. He would tell us that we are drowning in things while starving for meaning, and that each object we accumulate carries with it a piece of time and energy that we will never recover. Thoreau would denounce the cruelest trick of modern civilization, making us believe that fulfillment is synonymous with accumulation. That material abundance will automatically bring happiness, when, in fact, experience shows that excess is a suffocating golden prison, full of false glitter. And he would not fail to point out the perverse role of technology in this process, not as a villain in essence, but as a corrupted tool. A machine that could free us from mechanical tasks has been transformed into a continuous distributor of anxiety, envy, and comparisons, operated by a market that has discovered how to extract profit from our addiction to distractions. I would say that even time, the last frontier of personal freedom, has been privatized. There is no longer free time in the genuine sense. There are only intervals between ads, feeds, and notifications. Leisure, once a space for renewal of the soul, has become a packaged product, sold and emptied of authenticity. And the constant connection that screens promise reveals itself as the deepest disconnection we have ever experienced. From nature, from the natural cycles of day and night, from slow face-to-face conversations, and above all, from our own consciousness. The science of survival that Thoreau would present to us today would have nothing mystical about it. It would be a concrete call to regain possession of our time, simplify our needs, and reduce the noise that invades every minute. He would challenge us to live deliberately, to cultivate silence as a fertile space for thought, and to rediscover the pleasure of essential things, a sunset, a simple meal, a leisurely walk. Because the real revolution, he would say, is not that of machines but that of the soul. And that only begins when we have the courage to say enough to the tyranny of excess and reconnect with what really keeps us alive. Thoreau would see that today's cities are prisons without walls, where routine is a life sentence and consumerism is the golden cell. He would see workers waking up before sunrise to face hours in traffic, returning too late to see their children awake, living to pay bills that support objects they don't need and trips they barely enjoy. He would realize that what we call quality of life is often just a more expensive version of the same servitude, and he, as he has done in the past, would dare to say that life could be radically different if we had the courage to free ourselves from imposed standards. The revolution of simplicity begins when we recognize that much of what we carry, physically, mentally, and emotionally, is dead weight. That most of the tasks that fill our day do not bring us closer to anything meaningful. That the excess of options, far from giving us freedom, paralyzes and distracts us. That true prosperity is not measured by the size of your house, but by the amount of time you have to live in it. Thoreau would call us to a deliberate return to the essentials, living with fewer things, fewer distractions, fewer useless commitments, and more connection with the earth, with silence, with our own thoughts. He would remind us that by simplifying, we lose nothing important. On the contrary, we make room for what is essential to flourish. But this revolution is dangerous for the system. A simple and satisfied people are a people who do not buy out of anxiety, do not accept any job out of fear, and do not go into debt to keep up appearances. Such people do not feed predatory economies or politicians who depend on emotional misery to manipulate. That is why society will ridicule those who choose to live with less, will associate simplicity with failure, will try to seduce them with new needs, and will even turn minimalism into a luxury product. It is the old strategy: neutralize the revolutionary by turning him into a fashion. And that is why simplicity, to be true, must be lived as an act of resistance, not to be photographed and shared, but to be felt and defended. Today, more than in Thoreau's time, the challenge is not only to cut out excesses, but to protect oneself from the avalanche of stimuli that try to recreate them every day. Consumption is no longer just in stores. It's in your pocket, vibrating with notifications, promising happiness with every click. Modern slavery doesn't require chains around your ankles. All it takes is a service contract, revolving debt, or the need to upgrade your cell phone to continue participating in social life. And it is against this slavery that simplicity rises, not as nostalgia, but as a strategy for survival. The world needs Thoreau today because we are suffocated. Suffocated by commitments we did not choose, by debts we did not need, by comparisons that add nothing, by objects that steal space and time. We need him because we have forgotten that it is possible to live with little and still live a lot. We have forgotten that silence can be more valuable than any playlist, that walking in the woods can be more therapeutic than any meditation app, that growing your own food can teach you more about patience and care than any motivational course. We need Thoreau to remind us that life is not a race, it is a journey, and that there is no point in going through it carrying more than necessary. The simplicity revolution will not be televised, nor will it be sponsored. It begins in silence when someone decides that enough is enough. It begins when you say no to the next upgrade you don't need, when you cancel the subscription you don't use, when you trade a purchase for a walk, when you trade hours of work for hours of life. It starts small, but it spreads, because freedom is contagious. And like every revolution, it will encounter resistance, not because it is wrong, but because it threatens powerful interests. Still, it is the only revolution capable of giving back to human beings what no government, no company, and no app can offer: control over their own time and their own minds. If we want a healthier future, we will have to radically and urgently rewrite the definition of success that we have inherited from a society intoxicated by false metrics. We will have to abandon our idolatry of shiny showcases that measure value in digits and square meters, and rediscover the courage to measure life by the intensity of its presence rather than the weight of its possessions. We will need to accept, with the serenity of those who know their own essence, that having less is not failure, but often the highest form of victory. That it is not shameful to refuse a promotion that devours your days and mutilates your nights. That it is not laziness to choose to rest, contemplate, be with those we love, or simply sit in silence, because the world, in its distorted logic, has turned rest into a sin and exhaustion into a badge of honor. We will have to engrave Thoreau's warning in stone. The price of anything is the amount of life you trade for it. And if we are honest, we will see that much of what we buy is not worth the time it costs us. We are paying with the only currency that can never be replaced, time for goods and experiences that do not nourish us, do not elevate us, and do not heal us. We are investing our hours, which could be sown in freedom and meaning, in objects that gather dust, fads that pass, and status that dissolves at the slightest breath of others' forgetfulness. The world needs Thoreau because he embodied a rare courage, the courage to do this math, to face the fact that we are prisoners not of walls but of habits, that our shackles are not made of iron but of installments and subscriptions, that the time we sacrifice in the name of supposed prosperity distances us not only from the life we want, but from who we really are. And without this clarity, we will continue to sell our days for wages that buy our own alienation. We need Thoreau because we have forgotten that freedom is above all a matter of choice, not choice in the limited sense of products and brands, but real choice, the ability to decide what to do with our own time. He would remind us that we are not obliged to live as we are told, and that every must imposed by society can be disobeyed in the name of something greater, the integrity of living according to our own values. In a world where confusing abundance with fulfillment is almost the norm, Thoreau would be the voice that says, "Stop, look, you are being deceived." And perhaps, if we listen to him, we would discover that true luxury is having time to truly live. Simplicity, when viewed with the depth that Thoreau gave it, is not a romantic gesture nor a lifestyle for beautiful photos on social media. It is a silent but powerful rebellion against the machinery that seeks to measure the value of each human being by their ability to produce and consume. It is declaring that we will not sell every fragment of our lives to buy status, that we will not trade freedom for artificial comfort. It is understanding that every object we accumulate accumulates us back, charging its fee in time, energy, and attention. And when we choose less, we are not depriving ourselves of anything essential, we are simply refusing the excess that suffocates us. Simplicity is the art of saying no to what does not add value, so that we can say yes to what truly matters. Being simple in a world that idolizes excess is to take on a role of resistance. It is to accept that there will be strange looks, accusations of naivety or laziness, veiled comments about lack of ambition. But it is precisely in this space where the pressure to be more, to buy more, show more, do more, is overwhelming, that simplicity becomes a political act. It is not about living in scarcity, but about breaking the illusion that material abundance is synonymous with fulfillment. The real scarcity, the dangerous one, is that of time, silence, genuine human contact, and connection with nature. Thoreau, if he were here, would remind us that life is too short to be mortgaged to a system that only works when we are tired and distracted. He would tell us that a man who cannot be alone with his own thoughts is already imprisoned, even if his walls are made of glass and steel. That freedom is not something that can be bought, but something that must be preserved, and that preservation requires the courage to let go. It is in abandoning the superfluous that we discover lightness, not as a poetic metaphor, but as a real condition of life. Today, more than ever, we need that courage. We need to understand that the modern world has trained us to be consumers before we are people, and that simplicity is the rejection of that training. It is the reminder that every minute we give to the market, to the screen, to the fear of not being on the same level as others, is a minute stolen from our most authentic experiences. Choosing less is choosing to live. And living, as Thoreau knew, has never been about what we possess, but about what we are capable of abandoning without losing ourselves.